Wouldn't it be amazing if you could play your PlayStation 5 on the shitter? When Jim PlayStation asked that question during a meeting, he was met with questions upon questions. What about latency? Isn't that what remote play on phones and tablets is for? And did my boss really just say shitter? Are just a few of the pressing questions needed to be answered before tackling such a monumental hardware project. But Jim said, yes, we can. Took a DualSense controller and formed it into something wholly new. Well, actually, he just made it long and slapped a tablet in between both sides, but my version sounds better, so let's go with that. The result of this absolutely certainly true story is Sony's newest handheld but not handheld, the PlayStation Portal. But how does it work? How does it stack up against similar devices? And is there even a single reason on this earth to own this thing? Well, to answer those and many more questions, I suggest you give me a few minutes of your time, because we're doing our very first hardware review on this channel today. Oh, and just for the record, this video isn't sponsored by Sony or anyone else. I bought this myself, so everything I say is based off of my own experiences and opinions, not some provided bullet points to sell a product to you. If you've ever held a DualSense controller, that's the PS5 one, in your hands, the PlayStation Portal will immediately look and feel familiar, if mutated to you. While it's true that it suddenly has a screen, the parts you actually grab are pretty much exactly the same as the normal controller, with all the features you know and love intact. Buttons feel good, the adaptive triggers are still adaptive, and the haptic feedback works exactly like it does on your controller, although I have noticed that it makes some weird sounds when rumbling hard. The screen fits neatly in between these two familiar parts, forming an overall very good to hold and surprisingly light device that feels and looks a lot more premium and high quality than controller add-ons you can use on your phone. For reference, I own both a Backbone 1 as well as a Razer Kishi, and both can't even begin to compare to the Portal in build quality and handling. The screen itself is an 8-inch LCD screen that looks surprisingly great. Even though it's not an OLED, the colors pop really well, movement looks fluid, and it can get bright enough to easily be used even in daylight. There's no HDR on this thing though, resulting in games like Horizon or other HDR showcases looking a bit dull in comparison to a modern TV setup. It's also a touchscreen, so any navigation in the system menu can be done either by buttons or touch, allowing you to use the device pretty much like your average tablet. In fact, it is your average tablet. It's not really a proprietary Sony device as much as it's just an Android tablet with some custom firmware. It even shows up as Sony Android in my router's device list, whereas other Sony devices like the PS5 or PS Vita are listed under their actual name.
Nice.
The Portal supports Wi-Fi on both 2.4 and 5 GHz configurations, but no 6 GHz. Not very surprising given that most people's home Wi-Fi probably doesn't even use 6 GHz yet, but still a bit disappointing to see a 2023 device that is so heavily reliant on a good connection not opt to support a standard that's been around since 2020, especially when it would greatly benefit from it. The antenna in the device also seems to be kind of crappy given how I sometimes only got 2 out of 3 bars even when sitting in the same room as my router, something I couldn't replicate with any other Wi-Fi devices I had lying around. Sony's newest portable device obviously also comes with a battery, and they seem to have learned a bit from their horrible offering in recent controllers. With a good 6 to 8 hours of battery life, depending on brightness and controller features used, this thing's runtime is far above any other current handheld on the market. Of course, that should be expected given that it's just a streaming device and can thus use the battery much more efficiently than something like a Steam Deck or a ROG Ally, but it still results in longer playtime, which is definitely an upside in my book. Speaking of upsides, the Portal's top has 4 buttons, a power button, one for pairing headphones with Sony's new PlayStation Link technology, and 2 volume buttons. I really don't know which hearing-deprived 90-year-old this thing's speakers were designed for, but holy shit, is this thing loud. Even on the lowest volume, it was more than loud enough to be around what I usually play a handheld at, and now imagine how loud it gets with its 15 volume levels. Aside from loud, the speakers are also pretty crap. They offer absolutely no nuance in the sound, and any usage of Sony's superb 3D audio implementation on some of their games gets completely lost. If you're playing this thing without headphones, prepare for disappointment. And maybe even if you do use headphones, because chances are your usual headphones don't work with this thing. Because it doesn't offer Bluetooth audio. Yes, it has a headphone jack, but let's be real. It's 2023, most people use wireless headphones, especially for mobile devices like this. So either you use wired headphones or find an adapter for the few wireless headphones that even still have a cable connector. But of course, Sony has a pragmatic solution for your troubles. Earlier, I mentioned their new PlayStation Link Tech, which is used in their two newest PS5 headsets and are thus compatible with this device. So your choice, use cables, have a subpar experience with shitty speakers, or fork out another $150 to $200 for a new pair of headphones. Thanks Sony, this really is for the players, huh? One thing that immediately stood out as weird to me when the Portal was announced, and having it in my hands only accentuates that feeling, is that the device looks like it was just meant to be broken. I get the idea was to make something lightweight and in the same ugly but stylish concept as the PS5 itself, but this device has just so many potential points of cracking and breaking that I constantly feel like I have to handle it with the utmost care. Look at how open the lower parts of the screen just lie there. Sure, chances are if you drop it, it'll land on one of the controller sides and just crack that. But if that wholly unprotected screen happens to hit the floor, or you accidentally get it stuck somewhere while moving around, you can bet your ass this thing won't survive the impact. Boot up your new PS Portal and you'll be greeted by a very similar sight. It looks just like your PS5's menu. Thank God Sony hasn't given us themes for the PS5 yet, so everybody knows how the base menu looks and that the Portal is in fact a PlayStation device. Give us themes, Sony! After a few minor updates and linking the device to your console, you're given a very quick tutorial for what this thing can do. Swiping to the left from the right edge of the screen opens a quick menu that allows you to disconnect your console and put it to sleep mode in the process, manage the connection to a PS Link enabled device, as well as change the brightness, put on airplane mode, and go to settings. I couldn't test PS Link because, well, no device with such support exists at the time of writing, and I damn well cannot figure out why the hell this thing even has an airplane mode when you can't use it while it's in the mode, given how the Portal needs an internet connection and airplane mode turns that off. I really don't see the point. Even if, let's say, you wanted to take it on an airplane in the first place, instead of enabling that mode and make the device churn through its battery in standby, why wouldn't you just turn the thing off in the first place? If somebody can explain to me why this exists, I would much appreciate being enlightened. The settings themselves are as bare bones as they could get. Network allows you to set up an internet connection and check your NAT type. System lets you change some basic settings like language or resetting the device, and the brightness menu gives you options for turning off the lighting of the controllers and mic mute button. Oh, and there's a controller menu to set vibration and trigger intensity. That's it. But enough boring talk about menus. We're very excited to jump into our first game on this thing. While establishing the first connection took me almost 4 minutes, subsequent connecting attempts are much faster. Once you wake the Portal, it also wakes your PS5 from sleep mode, which then boots up for a few seconds and connects to the Portal. All in all, this process takes around 10 seconds and is much more streamlined and less cumbersome than any other remote play option I've tried before. And believe me, I've tried a lot. One thing Sony promised with this device was the ability to instantly jump back into your game, something other remote play devices cannot do. If I want to play remotely on my phone, I've got to pull off the case, put it in my backbone controller or connect the wireless one, boot up the remote play app, click through some menus, and then wait for it to connect, which can take up to a minute. The Portal eliminates most of these steps. You just press the power button, unlock it with the PlayStation button, and wait for it to connect, which is instant if the console is already running. Of course, leaving your console on just so you can instantly connect to it is kind of dumb and a good way to bloat your power bill, so while the option is there, it's kind of useless. Still, the Portal is by far the quickest method to remotely access your PS5, and I think they've done a stellar job here. Once you've connected, and given that you have a stable Wi-Fi connection, you'll be amazed by how good your games actually look on this thing. The screen really is stunningly good for an LCD panel, and the size of 8 inches paired with the very good grip the DualSense design provides gives you a stable and very immersive handheld experience. As long as you have a good connection, there is next to no tearing or pixelation, as well as input lag low enough to not matter at all in almost any game I've tried. The experience is almost indistinguishable from natively playing your PS5, and the few small trade-offs you must make pale in comparison to the sheer genius of essentially having a PS5 right there in your hands. Games where latency is of little importance obviously work well, but I was able to play Fortnite and even Hatsune Miku on the device without much trouble. Of course, it's not made for competitive, high-level play, but you wouldn't play on a handheld anyways if that's what you're looking for. If only it wasn't for remote play being about as unstable as Luffy's emotional state during Gear 5. Of course, being entirely reliant on connection, the experience of remote play hinges a lot on your home Wi-Fi. While I do have a very carefully thought out setup, I'm also sharing said setup with 5 other people, as well as all of their connected devices, meaning we have somewhere around 80 to 100 devices connected to our main internet hub, from phones to PCs and TVs and smaller stuff like smart lights or automatic pet food trays. Given that, I'm aware that even with a careful setup, there's a lot of congestion here, which may impact the performance of remote play no matter which platform. Your mileage may vary from what I experience with this device, but given that I can only review what I've tried, I hope you'll bear with me for a bit and don't just call me a hater or liar because it's working better or worse for you. As soon as someone else in my house was using the network actively, my gameplay on the PlayStation Portal turned to shit. Playing while my girlfriend is raiding in World of Warcraft while on Discord? No chance. Getting a round of Overwatch in while my dad is watching Netflix? Forget it. Even just having some internet radio run through our Amazon Echo caused the Portal to lag frequently despite there being more than enough bandwidth to go around, and me even setting the Portal and PS5 as priority devices in my router settings. There's also a weird thing going on with this device where it loses some serious connection quality when other wireless devices are in between the Portal and the internet access point. Even just placing my wireless headphones in front of the Portal dropped my connection by 1 bar, something that has a devastating effect on a device like this. By the way, I'm fortunate enough to have 2 separate internet contracts running, so I've tried both, much with the same results, even though one is capped at 500 megabytes per second while the other is only going to a max of 50 megabytes per second. So this is definitely not a problem with my internet connection. I've also tried every possible combination of connections, having the console wired or on Wi-Fi, connecting the Portal via 5 GHz and 2.4 GHz, but the results stayed the same. Of course, the Portal is still a remote play device, so some drop in quality is to be expected if you don't have your Wi-Fi to yourself, but there's one big problem with that: Chiaki. If you don't know, Chiaki is basically a third-person developed remote play app that aims to offer some more features and better connection stability to users on Android, PC, and Steam Deck. And holy hell does it work better. I went back and forth between my Portal and Steam Deck these past few days, trying out remote play under different circumstances back to back to see which performs better, and Chiaki won out in absolutely every single test I've run. The picture is less laggy and shows more persistent FPS, the input lag is equally small if not a tad bit better, and it runs well constantly even if other devices are clogging up the network to a degree where the Portal just gives up and disconnects entirely. Let me stress that this is not a problem specific to the PS Portal, but PS Remote Play as a whole. I get the same results on the official Remote Play app on every device, be it the Portal, my iPhone, iPad, or even my PC. So this is not something that is inherent to the Portal and cannot be fixed. However, until or if it ever gets fixed, it is an issue that prevents the Portal from offering a thoroughly enjoyable experience because you are stuck with Sony's shitty Remote Play app. The Portal is a proprietary device that comes installed with Sony software and only that. This means that you can't just install Chiaki and combine the amazing hardware with equally great software. You have to wait for Sony to get their ass off the floor and get to work on providing their customers with an adequate software solution. I won't claim to be a software or network expert, so I cannot tell you why Chiaki works better. I just know and prove through many tests on different devices that it does. And that is a serious pain point for a device that offers nothing but said inferior software solution. Another glaring but easily solvable problem is the implementation of display settings on Remote Play. See, the portal doesn't support HDR content, and HDR, as well as some other display settings, can cause troubles with streaming games anyway, so you'll want to have it off for when you play on the portal. Now, if Sony actually put some thought into this device's software, they'd have put some sort of automatic trigger in that just disables HDR whenever a Remote Play connection is established from a device that doesn't support HDR. But they didn't, resulting in your screen looking massively washed out in any HDR supported content you play. I don't know how visible this is on camera, but I've tried running Genshin Impact on the portal with HDR on, and it made the game look like a muddled mess of glares. Especially in menus, it's hard to make out anything, and it just doesn't look good, as well as negatively affecting the performance. Since just turning off HDR in PS5's display settings will easily solve this problem, I'll let it slide, but you can't access them from the portal. Whoever designed this needs some serious reevaluation, because this is just the absolute crap. During Remote Play, you have access to all of your console settings except for the display, meaning you cannot change the resolution, which would be very useful for making games run better given that the portal only supports 1080p anyways, or fiddle with any other settings, including HDR. This results in the following scenario. As someone who has an HDR TV, as many people nowadays do, the setting is obviously turned on for my console. If I want to play on my portal without having HDR to SDR converted sun rays of death in my face, I need to boot up my console, change the settings, and then connect the portal, making the whole point of the device remotely accessing your console completely mute. I really hope someone at Sony sees this, because this is a staggering oversight on not just the portal, but Remote Play as a whole, and needs to be fixed ASAP. Well, it needed to be fixed years ago, but Sony has been so shitty at supporting their own app that I'm not exactly surprised they haven't addressed this yet. A simple automated toggle would help, or adding display settings to the console's quick menu. Heck, just allow people to go into the setting. Nobody would mind some extra steps after booting it if it resulted in a better experience. This is probably not the first video you've watched on this device, so you might already know this, but the portal can be used outside of your home. As long as you have access to Wi-Fi and said connection is decent enough to allow for streaming games, you're good to go, and it works just as well as with your home Wi-Fi. The only issue here is that the portal doesn't have a web browser. Now this is weird. Why would that be an issue? Because almost any public Wi-Fi nowadays has some sort of pop-up that you need to accept before being able to access it. This means while your portal is technically able to play from anywhere you want, you are severely limited by the Wi-Fi the device is actually able to connect to. No going to McDonald's and playing some games while you wait for your food. Hotel Wi-Fi? How about Hotel Bi-Fi? You might not even be able to use your own phone as a hotspot, because some of the most popular models also require you to accept a pop-up when you connect to them, rendering them completely useless to your PlayStation Portal. Another severe oversight that could, and hopefully will, be fixed with a software update, but for the time being is a significant pain point in using the portal. And last but not least, the elephant in the room. Something so ridiculously dumb that it could only come from the company that priced the PS3 at $599 when it launched, which by the way is $914 today due to inflation. This device, a device which is streaming games via Wi-Fi from your PS5, a device that is not capable of running its own games, existing in an ecosystem that offers a subscription with hundreds of video games being streamable to your various network-enabled devices like PCs and phones, and that also just raised the price of said subscription by a good 30%. Fuck you for that, Sony, and told customers they want to add more value to the service. Well, they had the glorious idea to not allow using said subscription perks on the PlayStation Portal. Yep, that's right. You cannot use this to access PlayStation cloud streaming. Why the fuck not? There is absolutely no technical reason to not make this a feature. In fact, it would be a massive selling point. Just imagine the Portal being a new entryway into the PlayStation ecosystem where you can spend only around 36% of what a PS5 costs, and you get access to the full cloud streaming library at your fingertips. The whole point of cloud streaming is that your device either can't run the game natively or you don't want to download the game, right? Both of these things are not possible on the Portal anyways, and it only works with Wi-Fi as well, so in any situation where you could use the Portal at all, you would also have access to the cloud games anyways. So why are they locked, Sony? What kind of boneheaded agenda are you following here? I just absolutely cannot wrap my head around this huge missed opportunity, and they really need to get on activating this feature ASAP. I'm honestly split on whether to keep the PlayStation Portal or return it. On paper, the device is spectacular. Amazing build quality, full DualSense features, a beautiful big screen, and 7 to 9 hours of battery, all while being light enough to feel great to play even for long sessions. But when you actually use it, Sony's bare bones approach immediately becomes apparent. No browser functionality, which severely limits opportunities to use public Wi-Fi. HDR ruining the great picture quality with oversaturation not being able to be toggled while using the device. Remote play being way more unstable than third-party offerings, even years after Remote Play for PS5 coming out. Arbitrarily locking cloud streaming for God knows what reason. Sony really dropped the ball on the software side, and I find it very hard to recommend the Portal as it is now, which is why I will not give a final verdict, but a recommendation. If, and given their track record with supporting niche hardened software, that's a big if, they address most or even all of the issue the device has, the PlayStation Portal could become an absolute must-have for anyone who is interested in playing their PS5 on a mobile device and is willing to pay a premium to have the best experience possible. However, as it stands now, the Portal is a great piece of hardware plagued by bad software and a daunting list of obviously missing features. So after writing this review, I played around some more with different connection setups and noticed something interesting. Removing the aforementioned network congestion from my setup completely eliminated any issues I had with the streaming handheld. But how do you get rid of the congestion caused by all those other devices connected to your router at all times? Simple. Get a second router. I realize this is not an option for everyone, but what I did was the following. I bought a cheap-ish 5 GHz router that I directly connected to my main unit, effectively creating a mesh setup where the old router feeds the new one with connection, but said new router is only connected to the PS Portal, as in there is literally no other device, wireless or wired, connected to the thing. This immediately fixed any connection issues, so I can only deduce that the Portals or Remote Plays issues don't actually come from a bad or unstable connection, but it being horrendously unoptimized to deal with congestion caused by other devices, because this is a pretty niche fix. My initial review, critique, and recommendation still stands, but it's nice to know that there is a fix out there for people willing to spend a little bit more to optimize their setup instead of hoping for Sony to optimize their device.